Hey everybody, Marcus here. Yeah, it's been a good few years since my last video. Honestly, I did not expect that I would return to this channel. And I left consequent to the fact that I simply ran out of things to say. Now, Nietzsche once wrote in one of his aphorisms something that really stuck with me. After he finished reading a book he found, well, less than impressive, he said, "Never again will I read a book someone intended to write." And this is how I began to feel about the videos I was making at the time. They felt forced. They felt like content as opposed to videos that needed to exist. I think this happens to many YouTubers given enough time running their channels, that one day you wake up and you find yourself searching for something to make a video about. The ideas no longer flow naturally. The videos become forced. When this happens, well, you sort of lose your will to make them. The videos stop being an expression of yourself. They begin to feel like a job. And this is why I left. However, today, I have a lot to say. So, might as well get started. Since I first started this channel 10 years ago, the manosphere on YouTube has changed quite a bit. However, it has not only been the manosphere that has changed, the viewers have changed as well. I mean, concepts like the wall, hypergamy, and monkey branching used to be radical notions, taboo as far as the mainstream was concerned. But today, I mean, these concepts are mainstream. Channels that have nothing to do with the manosphere use these concepts openly. They've become common sense for the most part. Well, at least as far as the internet is concerned. Whether or not your typical man on the street is familiar with these terms is debatable. However, that too is changing. The typical man on the street in 2014 is being replaced by the next generation. The next generation of men on the street are Gen Z, and the newly emerging Gen Alpha as well. These two generations are composed of people who have never known the world before the internet, or social media for that matter. They grew up with the internet. The internet, while in many ways, was more of a parent to them than their actual parents were. This new generation operates with common manosphere jargon as part and parcel of their day-to-day parlance. In fact, as I write the script for this video, Grammarly, my spell checker of choice, recognizes the word manosphere and offers correction suggestions when I type the word in camel case as opposed to Pascal case. The fact that a mainstream grammar tool comes with this word built in tells you where we are as a culture. MGTOW concepts are not fringe ideas with Gen Z. They're common sense, yet Gen Z are not MGTOW. Gen Z, well, they're closer to incels, yet also not incels in the strictest sense. The majority of Gen Z, I would say, exist outside of relationships as a concept altogether. These are youths who have been tossed out of the world of relationships. This goes for both the men and the women. Hookup culture, at best, is the dominant form of interaction between the sexes. Gen Z look at the simple structure of girlfriend-boyfriend in a similar light to how older MGTOW look upon the 1950s husband-wife setup. It's a setup of a bygone era that seems to be impossible to reproduce in reality. This in turn is a problem of a completely different kind than what MGTOW faced. MGTOW are men who have had relationships. Well, some were married, some were not, but most have lived with a woman at one point in their life. Some were burned badly, while others less so or not at all. Whatever the circumstances of any given MGTOW turned out to be, they had a history of relationships. MGTOW always knew that if they so chose, they could go back to the plantation. And some did. And, if for no other reason than just to visit it out of nostalgia or to remind oneself of what it used to be. The option was always open, at least that was always true for MGTOW. With Gen Z, though, the plantation has been raised and the earth salted. There's no plantation to go back to for Gen Z. But like I said, this is true for the women as well as the men. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, but Marcus, Gen Z women can always find a boyfriend if they only lower their standards. I don't actually believe this is true. Now, I'll make a set of similar statements to illustrate my point. All someone needs to do to quit smoking is to stop lighting cigarettes. All someone needs to do to stop being an alcoholic is stop drinking. And all someone needs to do to stop being fat is to lose weight. Now, these statements are all true in some sense, yet they don't quite capture the enormity of the implications that underpin the acts proposed as the solutions. The process of moving from alcoholism to sobriety is pretty complicated. To stop opening bottles of beer and imbibing their content is mechanically simple, but psychologically pretty difficult. And in this way, for a woman, to lower her standards is psychologically challenging. Her biology works against her after all. Even if she wanted to, it may not be possible for her to do so. Much like a desire to stop drinking does not translate to sobriety by virtue of the desire to become sober. And so too with alcoholism, the key is to never get addicted in the first place. These women are as trapped in their biology as men are in theirs. As far as Gen Z is concerned, the women are pretty much all junkies. And as the saying goes, you can't trust a junkie, as she is loyal to the drug and not the dealer. The men of Gen Z, on the other hand, tend to be weak and effeminate. Now, this does not make them very attractive out the gate, even to a relatively realistic woman. The final problem of Gen Z is that they seem to be feral. These are not well socialized individuals. This applies to both the men and the women. An internet-based upbringing robbed them of their social skills. Social anxiety is one of the most commonly cited issues that Gen Z claim to suffer from. And honestly, I believe them. How could it have been otherwise, after all? One must practice in-person interactions to gain social skills. Social skills are called skills, and skills need practice to be developed. When you pair all these phenomena together, what you have is a generation that, for all intents and purposes, have been robbed of the faculty to form a meaningful relationship. Gen Z men, in general, do not need to worry about being screwed over by family court, because it's doubtful they can generate the circumstances for that to even become a possibility. If they can't even get a girlfriend, then family law is far from their realm of concerns. Though of course family court is still a problem, along with all the other things MGTOW have been warning about over the years, it appears all these warnings are losing relevance. There's a higher order problem to deal with here now. I posit that the psychological damage that a man incurs consequent to an inability to form any relationship at all far outweighs the downstream risks. Now, put another way, I believe that being cheated on or losing half your stuff in family court is a lesser evil than living with the reality that you can't get a woman at all. Suicidality, nihilism, and the sense of worthlessness is too high a price to pay for a little more financial security. Even the risk of being cheated on is a far smaller price to pay than absolute rejection by women. And no, I am not advocating for men to drop their guard against these things. I am, however, advocating for the proper placement of these concerns in the hierarchy of things. In this light, I believe that Gen Z desperately need help from older mentors. But these older mentors should focus their guidance around the problems Gen Z have, and not the problems the mentors' generation had. Also, I believe it is counterproductive to ridicule Gen Z. Gen Z, and those that have come after, are the result of the generations that raised them. If they are feral, it is because we have robbed them of the opportunity to socialize. If they are spoiled, it is because we have spoiled them. And if they are incompetent, it is because we did not teach them properly. Gen Z did not create themselves. They were created by those who came before. Gen Z are a consequence of our actions, and we need to take responsibility for them. The next generation of MGTOW content needs to be around mentoring young men into becoming men. They need to be encouraged. They need to be given hope about the future. They need to be made vividly aware of their own potential as men. Personally, I have long ago forgiven women for being women, or as Nietzsche would say, human, all too human. I have no revenge fantasies. I don't bask in the tragedy of childless cat ladies. Such women can now only serve as a warning to the generations that follow them. And I don't hold the next generation responsible for the sins of past women. As for the next generation of men, I don't look down on them. Many, unfortunately, are weak, but I believe that they can become strong. I've been around long enough to know what men are capable of, after all. I believe Gen Z can be brought back onto the right path. Not all of them, but enough of them. What Gen Z needs is for someone to explain their suffering to them. They need to be guided out of their nihilism, and when hope begins to reignite in them, they will finally be in a position to take responsibility for their own plight. Like Nietzsche said, those who have a why can suffer virtually anyhow. Gen Z does not have a why. As for the generations that came before, we need to give Gen Z a why they can actually get behind. After all, are we not supposed to be the wise old men? And if so, then our wisdom should be able to do at least that for Gen Z. So thanks for listening. Go team.